On the day we got our marriage license, Sonia Gray told me that if we ever slept in separate rooms for more than a week, it meant we had silently agreed to divorce. Every time we got into a fight, she would grab her pillow and run to the other room. And every time, I was the one who had to back down, lower my head and apologize. She used that threat to keep me wrapped around her pinky for 3 years. It was my 28th birthday. Once again, she missed our date because of the intern at her workplace. When she came home, she extended diamond cufflinks to me. I did not take it. Sonia frowned at me for a while before saying coldly, "You have a birthday every year. He doesn't get a second life. This isn't a game." I came back as fast as I could after taking Chris to the hospital. "Stop throwing a tantrum. How controlling can you be? You're a monster." She went right into the guest room. This time, I did not go after her. Sonia slammed the door shut like usual. Of course, she did it on purpose. She wanted me to give in and ask for peace. But this time, I stayed seated, quiet as stone. I did not cry or become anxious like I used to. I was tired of living life this way. I did nothing wrong, but every time, I was forced to beg for forgiveness. The air conditioning was turned up high, but the ice cream cake on the coffee table was still beginning to melt. Just like this marriage. No matter how much I tried, the cracks never healed. Instead, they grew bigger and more numerous. I scooped up a small dollop of ice cream and put it into my mouth. The sweetness did nothing to wash away the bitterness flooding my heart. We had been married for 3 years. In the first year, she stayed at her company, helping Chris Shaw amend his proposal, while leaving me alone on my birthday. In the second year, she went to the neighboring city with Chris on a work trip. That day had also been my birthday. Now she left me alone standing in the rain just because Chris called her over. I was staring blankly into space when the guest room door suddenly opened. She approached me, and my heart skipped a beat. A bit of ice cream stuck to the corners of my mouth. Sonia let out a resigned sigh and wiped it off with a tissue. "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean what I said. Yes, I know you hate it when I get too close to him. I promise I'll try my best to keep communication with Chris strictly tied to work." All the unfairness and hurt I had kept bottled up suddenly surged to the surface. My eyes reddened. For the first time in 3 years, she was the one taking a step back. Before I could even voice how happy I was, she continued. "Someone took a picture of me sending Chris to the hospital and sent it to the work chat. Everyone's calling Chris a homewrecker. He's sick. He shouldn't be dragged into this. I'd like you to clear his name." So much for her taking the first step. So much for feeling moved. She would throw me under the bus again and again for Chris. And now, she had only lowered herself to apologize because of him. For 5 years, I had poured my heart into loving this woman. Now I laughed in her face. She took that as a yes. "You're the best, honey. I'll add you into the group. Once you clear his name, you can apologize where everyone can see it." So, I cut her off. "Don't even think about it." She froze. The tender expression she had a moment ago vanished, replaced by exasperation. "We're innocent, Quincy. Why do you keep going after him? This rumor can very well ruin his life. He's just an intern straight out of college." The poor boy was crying his eyes out on the phone. I shot up from my seat and met her eyes. "I'm not interested in Chris' life. Spare me the report. And I'm not going to clear his name either." My fists were clenched, and my emotions were close to spilling over, but I held them in and kept my voice level. Sonia let out a mirthless laugh. "Fine. From now on, I'm staying at the company. If you still think you're a man, don't even try to talk to me." The door was slammed shut again. Something invisible squeezed around my heart, and the pain nearly stole my breath. Then my phone buzzed. I thought it was Sonia. Instead, it was a message from Chris. "MS. Gray took me to the hospital because I had a paper cut. Don't read too much into that. Only insecure guys are paranoid about everything." I stared at the screen for a few quiet moments, but I did not text back or delete the message. Sonia kicked me out of her car and left me stranded in the downpour for Chris. I thought he had suffered a near-fatal injury. In the end, it was nothing but a paper cut. When I had appendicitis and the pain had kept me curled up in bed, I had asked her to bring me some water. Back then, she had called me a pampered prince. A bitter smile curled my lips. It was obvious who Sonia truly loved, even if they had never crossed that final line. She didn't come home for the next 3 days, but I did not sit around waiting either. I started packing my things up, bit by bit. This house belonged to her even before we were married. Of course I was the one moving out. On the 4th day of our separation, my friend asked me out for some fun. I used to say no to them, since I had to stay home and wait for Sonia. This time, I said yes immediately. For the first time in forever, I finally had an outing. And just my luck, I ran into the 2 people I least wanted to see. Sonia's eyes lit up for a moment, but then it was replaced by disdain. She frowned. "You came all the way here? God, you're an embarrassment." I was about to retort when Chris mocked. "Oh, don't be so harsh. He just doesn't want the divorce to go through. There are only 3 days left after all." Then he turned to me. You're embarrassing us men, bro. If it were me, I'd wait until day 7 before talking to Ms. Gray. Their friends played along. Ms. Gray has her husband wrapped right around her pinky. Take some notes, people. The praise was stroking Sonia's ego well. She spoke to me as if she were granting me mercy. I get it. I'll be home tonight. Leave. You're ruining the vibes. That was not the first time she had said something like that. I used to think nothing of it. But now, for some reason, I hated that tone. I looked at Sonia's smug expression and said coldly, I couldn't care less even if you wanted to stay at your company forever. And I'm here for something else. I went around them and kept walking into the club. My response surprised them enough to leave them frozen. But Chris snapped out of it first and grabbed my wrist. Stop pushing your luck, Chris. She's already going home tonight. I don't want to get the brunt of your fury when she gets angry. You'd love it if we got divorced, Chris. It'd be the perfect opening for you. Cut your crap acting. It's disgusting. I flung Chris' hand away. It was barely a push, but Chris let out a scream dramatic enough to shame a ghost and stumbled backward. He did not fall to the ground. Instead, he fell straight into Sonia's arms. His eyes reddened, and he put on a wounded pout. I think I should quit my job, Ms. Gray. Everyone's calling me a homewrecker behind my back, because Quincy thinks I am. And now he's hitting me. Thank God our colleagues aren't here, but what if she comes after me at work? Sonia's expression darkened like a storm. She held Chris tightly in her arms and glowered at me. Apologize to him right now, she demanded. I met her eyes without backing down. Not happening. Her lips pressed into a thin, straight line. Either you apologize or we're done. I had already checked out of this marriage, but hearing those words straight from her still shook me for a moment. I did not let it show. Instead, I sneered. Fine by me. My mood had been ruined, and I did not want to bring that energy to my friend's outing, so I went straight home. That little episode left me thinking I might not get any sleep, but instead, I slept soundly. When morning came, I woke up only to see Chris in my house. For a second, I wondered if I had woken from one dream into another. Chris had only a towel wrapped around his waist. The rest of him was bare as he wandered around the house. Sonia was in the kitchen making oatmeal. It was unimaginable, given that she never did any chores. The sounds of me walking downstairs drew their attention. Sonia frowned but said nothing. Chris quickly explained, It's not what you think. I drank too much and threw up everywhere. I lost my keys too, so Ms. Gray had no choice but to bring me here. I snickered. No choice. I think she very much loved taking you home. Sonia slammed her ladle back into the cauldron and swiveled around. She stared at me, her voice filled with impatience. Stop while you're ahead, Quincy. What a joke. She had brought another man home. Yet I was the one going too far? The audacity was almost impressive. She thought she could do this only because I held deep love for her. Anyone who loved her even a little less would have left the moment she came up with that silent divorce threat. I thought love and acceptance would return to me in the same magnitude, but I had forgotten one thing. Bowing to her again and again would only make her think less of me. My silence stretched and Chris bit his lip. Sorry for this, Ms. Gray. I think I should leave. He pretended to move toward the door. Sonia grabbed his hand before he could even turn. But you're barely wearing anything. What if you run into the wrong sort? I'll take you home after breakfast. After your clothes are dried. She turned to me again, her impatience nearly dripping from every word. First thing in the morning, and you're ruining everyone's day. Sometimes I wish I never married you. Silence crashed into the room like a mountain. It did not take long for Sonia to realize she had gone too far. Sonia opened her mouth, but I refused to give her time for any explanation. Icily, I said. That makes 2 of us, Sonia. You 2 stay. I'll leave. I went upstairs and came back down 10 minutes later with my luggage in tow. Sonia's eyes narrowed. Something close to delight flickered in Chris's eyes, but he quickly covered it with an innocent expression. You don't have to do this, Quincy. She's just my boss, nothing more. I had nowhere to go and nothing to change into. She only took me in out of charity. I would have ignored him, but Chris had pushed his sickening little act too far. So I snapped at him. Oh please. You had more places to go than you could possibly choose from. Imperia has enough hotels for you to stay in a different one for the rest of your life. You could have bought fresh clothes from any random mall. Yet here you are, half naked in another man's wife's house. Chris froze up. He had no comeback, so he immediately looked at Sonia like an injured puppy begging for help. Quincy. I shut her down before she could start. Shut up. I don't want to hear your voice. With that, I left. 3 days passed. Then a full week. The promised deadline had arrived. My phone refused to stop buzzing. Our mutual friends barraged my phone with endless texts. You're still mad at her? Come on, she's a softie. She's not even mad at you anymore. Just talk nicely and this will all blow over. Hey, she's reassigned Chris to another department. You should really stop this tantrum. It's the last day. Come on, stop acting tough. You can't find a woman like her anywhere else. If this divorce goes through, Someone else is going to swoop in right away. I laughed. She was the one towing the line of infidelity, but these people thought I should be apologizing to her. I texted in the group chat. We're going through the process as we speak. I'm blocking everyone who told me to suck it up. Bye. That was no threat. I blocked all our mutual friends immediately and asked an attorney to send the divorce papers to Sonia. After that, I checked out of the room and grabbed a ride to the airport. Sonia was in a meeting, but her mind was somewhere else. She was restless, checking her phone again and again. Still, there was no news from me. She had been waiting for days. After what felt like an eternity, the meeting finally came to an end. The first thing she did after coming out was turning her attention to the reception room, but it was empty. The old me would have begged for reconciliation in less than 3 days. Now a full week had passed, and I had not made a single move. She wondered if I was really mad this time. She thought it was just a birthday. In her mind, I was overreacting over something that came around every year. Then something hit her, and her eyes narrowed. She had missed my birthday 3 years in a row. And every single time, it had been because of Chris. That answered her question. A sliver of guilt crept into her heart. She knew she had gone too far, so she texted me. I'll take you to the beach once I'm done with work. You've always wanted to have a vacation there. The message failed to send. I had blocked her. A frown creased her forehead. She quickly called me, but only a detached automated voice answered. I had blocked her number too. The air in the office turned a few degrees colder. She was about to ask her assistant to find out which hotel I had been staying at when the assistant came in first. Ms. Gray, a file from Mr. Maillard. Sonia's frown smoothened out, and her mood buoyed. And I thought he had grown a spine. In the end, he's begging me anyway. But he's an understanding man. I can let this tantrum slide. Get a watch from the jewelry store, and book a reservation at that fancy restaurant on the west side. Tonight Her words died in her throat the moment she saw what was inside the file. The leather-bound folder on her mahogany desk was not a handwritten apology, nor was it a reservation confirmation for the beach resort on the west side. It was a standard blue-back legal document from Vance & Partners, the most ruthless family law firm in the city. The bold, black letters at the top of the first page seemed to jump out of the white paper, burning themselves into Sonia's eyes. Petition for dissolution of marriage and division of CO-owned assets. Sonia's hand froze. The silver fountain pen she had been holding rolled off her fingers, clattering against the glass top of her desk before dropping onto the floor. Ms. Gray, her assistant, a young woman named Clara, asked, her head tilted, her hand still holding the empty tray. Should I go ahead and book the reservation at the restaurant? The manager said they only have one booth left, near the window. No, Sonia said. Her voice was barely a whisper, stripped of the sharp executive authority she had used during the morning meeting. Cancel it. And the watch. Leave, Sonia commanded, her voice dropping into a low, flat register that made Clara's shoulders instantly tighten. Get out of my office. And do not let anyone in. Especially Chris. Yes, Ms. Gray. The heavy glass door clicked shut, isolating Sonia in a quiet, air-conditioned silence that suddenly felt too cold, too vast. She picked up the document. Her eyes scanned the pages, searching for the familiar, emotional complaints that Quincy usually made when we had our fights. The paragraphs where he would accuse her of neglect, of coldness, of caring more about her junior than her own husband. But there was no emotion. The division of assets was simple, clean, and utterly heartless. Quincy was not asking for her house, her stock in the Gray Group, or the joint savings account they had opened when they got married. He had simply listed his own premarital holdings, his personal books, his clothing, and a single $20,000 cash deposit, the exact amount of his personal savings he had used to fund her company's logistics terminal last year. At the bottom of the final page, his signature was written in a sharp, elegant cursive that did not shake. Quincy Maillard. He hadn't even used her last name. He had signed with his premarital legal name, a name he hadn't used in 3 years. Sonia's heart did a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. She pulled out her personal phone and dialed his number again. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please check the number. And try again. A block, she muttered to the empty room, her fingers tightening around her phone until her knuckles went white. He actually blocked me. He's playing chicken. He thinks because the 7-day deadline has passed, I'll panic and beg him to come back. She stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the bustling financial district. Fine, she whispered to the wet glass, her jaw set in a hard, rigid line. If you want to play the martyr, Quincy, go ahead. Let's see how many days you can survive in some cheap hotel before you realize that without my name, you're just another freelance designer with no clients. She tossed the blue-backed folder into her desk drawer, slid the lock shut, and turned her attention back to her laptop. But as she typed her login passcode, her fingers hovered over the keys. November 12th. It was my birthday. The date she had used as her laptop password for 3 years, yet she had spent the last 3 of those dates sitting in a private dining room with Chris, drinking vintage champagne while Quincy sat in the dark with a melting ice cream cake. A sudden, faint knot of unease began to form in the pit of her stomach. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in silent decay. In the past, whenever Quincy and I had our fights, the house would remain immaculate. The clothes were always dry cleaned, the groceries stocked, the small lavender bundle in our bathroom replaced every Friday to keep the air smelling of fresh rain. Now the townhouse on the hill felt cold, dusty, and entirely too large. Sonia had hired a professional cleaning service to come in twice a week, but the maids didn't know where she kept her specific tea blends, and they certainly didn't know how to adjust the water heater, so it didn't hiss in the middle of the night. And then there was Chris. Now that Quincy was gone, the forbidden thrill of their relationship seemed to have lost its glow. Without Quincy standing in the kitchen, glaring at them with that quiet, miserable jealousy that fed Chris's fragile ego, Chris was no longer a sweet, protective victim. He was just a needy, high-maintenance 22-year-old who couldn't even format a basic M&A report without asking for her help. Ms. Gray, Chris said, stepping into her office without knocking, his lower lip slightly pouted, his dark hair messy. The director of the logistics department just yelled at me in front of the whole team. He said my tax margins were off by 3%. He told me if I make another mistake, he'll have my internship terminated. Sonia didn't look up from her screen. The director was right, Chris. A 3% margin error on a $40 million contract is a $1,200,000 deficit. You should have checked the formula before you submitted it. Chris froze. He hadn't expected this tone from her. In the past, she would have patted his shoulder, bought him a coffee, and called the director into her office to soften his approach. But, Ms. Gray, he whined, taking a step closer to her desk. I was tired. Last night. I stayed up until 3 to help your mother pack her things for her trip. I thought you'd understand. My mother has 3 personal assistants, Chris, Sonia said, her voice flat, carrying a cold, sharp edge of exhaustion. She didn't need an intern to pack her bags. Go back to your desk. Fix the formula. And don't enter my office without knocking again. Chris's eyes went wide, wet with tears that seemed genuine for the first time. Ms. Gray, did I do something wrong? Is this because of Quincy? Because he's still hiding in that hotel? He's just trying to make you feel guilty, Ms. Gray. He's using his silence to control you. I said get out, Chris, Sonia said, her voice dropping into a register that made his skin crawl. Chris stared at her, his fingers clenching his tablet tightly, before he turned on his heel and walked out, slamming the heavy glass door behind him. Sonia sat in the quiet office, her hand reaching into her desk drawer to pull out the blue-backed folder. Quincy Maillard. She had contacted her family's private investigator last night to track down his address. She had expected to find his name on the guest ledger of some cheap, drafty motel near the industrial district. But the PI's report had been delivered to her inbox an hour ago. Quincy wasn't in a hotel. He had leased a luxury loft in the high-rise district of the Southern Bay, paid for entirely by his own independent design agency, an agency he had secretly registered under his family's name 2 years ago. And his client list? It included 3 of the Gray Group's largest commercial competitors. He hadn't been waiting for her to call. He had been preparing his exit for 2 years, using her own silent divorce threat to buy himself the time he needed to build his own fortress. The annual Imperial Business Gala was held at the Ritz-Carlton. It was the event of the year, a gathering of the city's elite to celebrate the top-performing companies. Normally, the Gray Group would have been sitting in the front row, their table decorated with imported white lilies there. Executives drinking vintage champagne. But tonight, the Gray table was in the 3rd row near the exit. Sonia sat in a simple black silk dress, her makeup carefully applied to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Beside her, Chris was wearing a rented tuxedo, his fingers twisting his champagne flute with a nervous, rapid rhythm. He had been demoted to a junior clerk position last week, and his presence at her table was already causing a flurry of whispered gossip among the other board members. Ms. Gray, her senior director, an older man named Mr. Vance, said, leaning over her shoulder, "The chairman of the Pierce Trust is attending tonight. They're announcing the new logistics partner for the Northern Terminal. If we can just get a 5-minute meeting with their representative." "I've tried calling their office, Mr. Vance," Sonia said, her voice hollow. "They're not taking my calls. They said the contract has already been awarded to an independent agency." "Which agency?" Before Mr. Vance could answer, the master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone, his voice echoing through the silent room. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have the distinct honor of welcoming the new lead creative director for the Northern Terminal Project, Mr. Quincy Maillard. The double doors of the ballroom opened. A team of 4 private security guards in dark navy suits walked in, forming a human corridor from the entrance to the stage. Behind them came Quincy. He was wearing a bespoke, midnight blue tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His hair was styled back, his skin looking bright, healthy, and entirely free of the gray, paper-like exhaustion that had defined his final days. In her townhouse, his face was calm, symmetrical, and entirely unyielding, a face of a man who owned the very air the guests were breathing. The ballroom went dead silent. Sonia stood up so quickly her chair nearly scraped against the floor. Her hand went to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror so deep she forgot to breathe. "Quincy," she whispered. Beside her, Chris's glass slipped from his fingers, crashing against the table, and splashing red wine across the white cloth. No, that's impossible. That's him? That's the kid who? The director, Mr. Vance gasped, his face turning a gray paper-like color as he stared at the man he had once called a pampered prince. "My God. Sonia, that's your husband." "Ex-husband," Sonia corrected, her voice barely a breath. Quincy walked up the steps of the stage, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Didn't look at the gray table. He didn't need to. To him they were already ghosts. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Quincy said, his voice low, steady, and carrying the quiet, absolute authority of his name. "Tonight, Maillard Design is officially assuming the creative management of the Northern Port Terminal. We look forward to building a modern, clean horizon for our city's trade." The applause that went up was deafening. Sonia ran toward the stage, her high heels clicking against the marble, her hands reaching out toward him. The security guards immediately stepped forward, their hands resting on their holsters, but Quincy raised a hand, stopping them. He looked down at her from the edge of the stage. "Quincy," Sonia sobbed, her knees touching the cold marble as she looked up at him. I made a mistake. I was blind. Chris was nothing to me. He was just an intern. I love you, Quincy. We've been married for 3 years. You can't just destroy my family over this." Quincy looked at her. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. He looked at her with the quiet, cold curiosity of a scientist looking at a specimen. "Do you remember the rain, Sonia?" he asked softly. Sonia blinked, her tears pausing. The rain. "My 20th birthday," Quincy said. "The downpour at the terminal. You kicked me out of the car because Chris had a paper cut. You told me to be mature. You told me to buy my own tea. I was just stressed, Quincy," she cried, her fingers clutching the hem of his trousers. "I didn't mean it. I promise I'll make it up to you. I bought the watch, Quincy. The $28,000 one you liked." Quincy let out a low, quiet sigh. "I don't like watches, Sonia," he said. "I only wore them because you said GM's husband should look respectable. I prefer the simple, white face of my kitchen clock." He turned and walked away, flanked by his security detail and Marcus, leaving Sonia kneeling in the dark of the grand ballroom, surrounded by the silent, mocking stares of the world she had tried so hard to own. The final divorce decree was signed on a Tuesday. It was a gray, overcast day, the mist from the ocean rolling over the city, turning the skyscrapers into long, blurry smears of concrete. We sat in the conference room of Vance and Partners. Sonia was sitting across from me, her face shrunken, her eyes hollowed out by 6 weeks of legal warfare and public scandal. She had lost the house, her shares in the Gray Group, and her reputation. The Maillard Group had bought out her outstanding debt at a 90% discount, leaving her legally and financially bankrupt. She didn't look like the proud, strict CEO who had prided herself on her professional distance. She looked like an empty shell, her silk dress hanging loose and wrinkled on her frame. "Quincy," she said, his voice a dry, rattling whisper as she picked up the pen to sign the final page. "We were together for 5 years. 5 years. How could you just destroy me like this? Over an intern? Over a few business dinners?" "I didn't destroy you, Sonia," I said, keeping my hands folded in my lap, my voice as calm as the sea. "You built a house of sand, and you were surprised when the tide came in. You thought because I was quiet, because I was devoted, I would always be waiting in the other room, ready to beg for your forgiveness." I stood up, not waiting for her to finish her tears. "The pen is yours, Sonia," I said, walking toward the door. "Keep it. It's the only thing in this room you can actually afford." The door opened wide, the cold wind from the stairs blowing through the office. My assistant was standing there, holding my leather coat and my private keys. Beside her stood Marcus, carrying his folder, and my new design partner, a tall, quiet woman with dark eyes who had worked beside me for 3 years to build the agency. "Are you ready, Quincy?" she asked, her voice carrying a quiet, genuine warmth. "Yes," I smiled, stepping out into the bright, clean light of the lobby. "Let's Go. The Maillard Group took over the Gray Group's old office building on Monday morning. The transition was quiet, clinical, and witnessed by every single employee on the floor. Chris stood in the lobby, wearing his rented suit, his tablet clutched tightly against his chest. His desk had been cordoned off with yellow security tape, the company IT crew descending on his terminal to clear his credentials. Mr. Maillard, Chris cried, running toward me as I walked past, his voice losing all its fragile, sweet polish. Please. This is a misunderstanding. Sonia. Sonia was the one who forced me. She told me if I didn't come to her room, she'd terminate my internship. I didn't look at him. I simply kept walking, my boots clicking a slow, steady cadence against the marble floor. The police are waiting in the lobby to execute the criminal warrant, Chris. My assistant said, her voice flat. Your personal credit cards, the ones you used to buy the $28,000 necklace under Ms. Gray's company name, have been reported for corporate embezzlement. Chris's face went completely pale. He looked at the two security guards standing behind me, then at the empty gray corridor of the lobby, and slowly sank onto the floor. Take him out, Clara, I said, my voice quiet as the winter wind. His presence is disturbing my senior analysts. Yes, Mr. Maillard, the guard said, grabbing his arm. Chapter 10. The Clear Sky. The coastal town of Mendocino was quiet in the winter. The air smelled of salt, pine needles, and the cold mist that rolled off the Pacific every morning. The only sound was the distant rhythmic crash of the waves against the black cliffs of the harbor. I sat on the wooden deck of my small, gray-shingled cottage, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my hand. My home was small, warm, and entirely peaceful, the floor-to-ceiling glass windows looking out over a garden of wild rosemary and lavender. Beside me on the table lay my drawing tablet, its screen displaying a clean, elegant design for our new municipal park project. Quincy. I looked up. My colleague, a tall, quiet man with dark hair and a green backpack, named Marcus, was standing by the glass door, holding a fresh batch of warm cinnamon rolls. The wind is picking up, Quincy, Marcus smiled, sitting down beside me and pulling a wool blanket over our knees. Are you cold? I looked down at the design on my screen, then at the golden sunset over the ocean, and finally at his warm, genuine smile. No, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder, my fingers closing around the warm ceramic of my teacup. I'm very warm. Across the water, the first yellow lights of the harbor were starting to glow in the dark, but I didn't look at them. I closed my eyes, took a sip of my warm tea, and let the clean, cold wind off the ocean carry the last dry leaves of the past away into the endlessly beautiful horizon ahead.